The distant thunder of hoofbeats broke the stillness of the Wyoming prairie as Fiona Parker clutched her swaddled infant to her chest, her heart pounding with a fear that threatened to swallow her whole. It was 1875, and the gold rush had transformed good men into monsters, men like the three riders closing in on her small homestead cabin, the same men who'd made an offer that still turned her stomach. $500 in gold for her 3-month-old daughter. No one needs to know, they'd said. Folks back east pay good money for healthy babies. Fiona had fled St. Louis 6 months ago, her belly swollen with child and her reputation in tatters after her sweetheart had abandoned her upon discovering she was with child. She'd traveled west with what little money she had, purchased this small plot of land, and delivered her daughter alone in a cabin built by her own hands. But times had grown desperate. Winter was coming, food was scarce, and now these men, these vultures, circled her home. "They're back," she whispered to little Emma, kissing her downy head. "But I won't let them take you. Not for all the gold in Wyoming." She barricaded the door with her small table and reached for the rifle her father had insisted she take when she left home. She'd never fired it at a person before, but for her daughter, she would become whatever she needed to be, even a killer. The riders pulled up outside her cabin, their shadows darkening the small window. "Miss Parker," called a gravelly voice she recognized as belonging to Silas Webster, a man who ran the trading post 20 miles east. "We've come to finalize our arrangement." "There is no arrangement," she shouted back, her voice steadier than she felt. "Leave my property now." A low chuckle carried through the wooden walls. "Now, Miss Parker, don't be foolish. Winter's coming, and you won't survive it alone with that baby. 500 in gold can get you back to civilization. The child will have a proper family, education, everything you can't provide." Fiona bit her lip until she tasted blood. "I said leave." The door shuddered as one of the men slammed against it. "We tried being reasonable," Webster called. "But that child is worth too much. You'll thank us when you're not burying her in the spring." The barricade wouldn't hold long. Fiona backed toward the small alcove where Emma's cradle sat, rifle raised. She had 5 bullets and 3 men to stop. Her hands trembled, but her aim remained true as the door splintered inward. Just then, another sound cut through the chaos, thundering hooves approaching fast, followed by a shot that cracked through the air like lightning. The men at her door froze. "Step away from that cabin, Webster." The new voice was deep and commanding, and it carried a deadly promise. Through the broken door, Fiona glimpsed a tall figure on horseback, silhouetted against the setting sun. A rifle was raised in his hands, pointed directly at Silas Webster's chest. "This ain't your concern, Mackenzie," Webster spat. "You're trying to take a child from its mother. I'm making it my concern." The rider dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jangling as his boots hit the ground. "Miss, are you hurt?" he called to her without taking his eyes off the men. "No," Fiona managed. "Not yet." "Good. Webster, I'm going to say this once. You and your men get back on those horses and ride away. This woman and her child are under my protection now." Webster laughed, but it held a nervous edge. "Since when did you become a guardian angel, Mackenzie? Word is you've killed more men than smallpox." The newcomer stepped forward, and Fiona caught her first clear look at him. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled beneath a well-worn hat. His face was weathered by sun and wind, but his eyes were sharp and clear as they fixed on Webster. "That reputation should concern you," he said quietly, "especially since I'm telling you to leave." One of Webster's companions shifted uneasily. "Silas, that's Dakota Mackenzie. The one they call the Ghost Rider. Let's just go." Webster's face contorted with rage. "The baby's worth a fortune." Dakota Mackenzie's expression hardened. "Not while I breathe." His words hung in the air like a death sentence. After a long, tense moment, Webster spat on the ground. "This isn't over. For your sake, it better be," Dakota replied evenly. The 3 men backed away slowly, mounted their horses, and rode off, throwing venomous glances over their shoulders. Only when they were specks on the horizon did Dakota Mackenzie lower his rifle and turn to Fiona. "Madam," he said, removing his hat. "Dakota Mackenzie. I was passing by and heard the commotion." Fiona stood frozen in the doorway, her rifle still clutched in white-knuckled hands, her baby now crying softly against her chest. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. But they'll be back. Dakota nodded grimly. I suspect they will. Webster's not one to let things go. He glanced at her ruined door, then at the sparse interior of her cabin. You can't stay here alone. I have nowhere else to go, Fiona admitted, fighting back tears of exhaustion and fear. And no one to turn to. Dakota hesitated, then said, My ranch is a half-day's ride from here. You'd be safe there until we figure something more permanent. He must have seen the distrust in her eyes because he quickly added, I have a housekeeper, Mrs. Caldwell. She's been with me for years. You'd be under her chaperonage. As if sensing her mother's indecision, Emma began to wail in earnest. Fiona bounced her gently, her mind racing. Stay and face Webster's return, or trust this stranger who'd just saved their lives. Why would you help us? She asked, searching his face for any hint of deception. Because no one helped my sister when she needed it, he answered simply, his eyes flickering with an old pain. Those men want to sell your baby for profit. I can't stand by and let that happen. The sincerity in his voice struck her. Fiona looked down at Emma, then at her broken door, and made her decision. We'll come with you, she said. But I need to gather a few things. Of course, I'll tether my horse and help secure your door as best we can. Within the hour, Fiona had packed what little she owned clothing for her and Emma, a locket containing a strand of her mother's hair, her father's Bible, and a few precious supplies. Dakota fashioned a makeshift door from a blanket and boards, then helped her mount his horse, carefully placing Emma in her arms before swinging up behind her. As they rode away from the only home Emma had known, Fiona felt a mixture of terror and relief. The warmth of Dakota's chest against her back was steadying, but she reminded herself that trusting men had led her to this precarious position in the first place. I won't keep you at my ranch any longer than necessary, she said over her shoulder. Once I find work, we'll be on our way. There's no rush, Dakota replied, his voice rumbling against her back. Winter's coming, and jobs are scarce. You focus on keeping that little one healthy. They rode in silence for miles, the vastness of the Wyoming territory spreading out around them. Emma eventually fell asleep, lulled by the rhythmic motion of the horse. The sun was setting in brilliant oranges and purples when Dakota finally spoke again. My ranch is just beyond that ridge. It's not fancy, but it's secure. Webster and his kind won't dare come there. When they crested the hill, Fiona gasped. Below them sprawled a substantial ranch with a sturdy main house, a large barn, several outbuildings, and fenced pastures dotted with cattle. It wasn't the small operation she'd expected, but a thriving enterprise. You own all this? She asked in disbelief. Dakota nodded. 10 years of hard work. Started with nothing but my horse and rifle. As they approached, a plump older woman emerged from the main house, wiping her hands on an apron. Her gray hair was neatly pinned, and her expression was one of curiosity rather than judgment as Dakota helped Fiona dismount. Mrs. Caldwell, Dakota called. We have guests who'll be staying with us for a while. This is Miss Fiona Parker and her daughter. Mrs. Caldwell's face softened when she saw the baby. Land sakes, Mr. Mackenzie, you should have sent word ahead. I'd have prepared a proper welcome. She bustled forward to take Fiona's arm. Come inside, dear. You look dead on your feet. I've got stew on the stove and fresh bread just out of the oven. Fiona found herself gently but firmly guided into a warm kitchen that smelled of herbs and baking. Mrs. Caldwell settled her at a large wooden table, clucked over Emma's tiny face, and insisted on holding the baby while Fiona ate. First proper meal in days, I'd wager, the housekeeper muttered. Too thin by half, both of you. Dakota hung back, seeming almost awkward now that they were in his home. I need to see to my horse, he said. Mrs. Caldwell will get you settled in the guest room. Before Fiona could thank him again, he was gone, leaving her with the motherly housekeeper who was already telling her about the ranch and asking gentle questions about Emma. For the first time in months, Fiona felt the knot of tension in her chest begin to loosen. They were safe, at least for tonight. Days at the ranch quickly turned into weeks. Dakota was often busy with ranch work, but he made time each evening to check on Fiona and Emma. At first, their conversations were stilted and brief, but gradually, they began to share stories over dinner. Fiona learned that Dakota had come west after the war, where he'd fought for the Union. He'd built his ranch from nothing, earning a fearsome reputation for dealing harshly with rustlers and outlaws. The Ghost Rider, Fiona said one evening as they sat on the porch, Emma sleeping in her arms. Why do they call you that? Dakota looked uncomfortable. It's just a name. Doesn't mean anything. Webster's men seemed to think differently. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. During the war, I was a scout. Got good at moving unseen, striking fast. After, when I was building this place, some men thought they could take what I'd worked for. I convinced them otherwise. His eyes met hers. I've done things I'm not proud of, Fiona, but I've never harmed an innocent. She believed him. Over the weeks, she'd seen his gentleness with the ranch hands, his patience with a new colt, and the way he'd rock Emma when she was fussy, his large hands surprisingly adept with the tiny infant. As November turned to December, Fiona found herself watching for Dakota throughout the day, her heart lifting when he'd enter a room. She began helping Mrs. Caldwell with cooking and mending, insisting on earning her keep. When Dakota discovered she could read and write better than most, he asked for her help with correspondence and ledgers. My father was a schoolteacher, she explained, blushing under his impressed gaze. He insisted I learn, even though my mother said it wasn't proper for a girl. Your father was a wise man, Dakota said. Intelligence isn't determined by whether you wear trousers or a skirt. The first heavy snow came in mid-December, transforming the ranch into a wonderland of white. It also brought news that chilled Fiona's blood. One of the ranch hands returned from town with rumors that Silas Webster was gathering men, telling anyone who'd listen about a valuable baby that could fetch thousands back east. He's gone mad with it, the ranch hand told Dakota, unaware that Fiona was listening from the hallway. Says the child has some connection to a wealthy family. Claims he has buyers waiting. That night, after Emma was asleep, Fiona found Dakota in his study, cleaning his rifle by lamplight. I heard about Webster, she said quietly. We should leave. I won't bring trouble to your door after all you've done. Dakota set aside his rifle and stood. You're not going anywhere. Webster's a snake, but he's not fool enough to come here. But if he brings enough men, he won't. Dakota stepped closer. Fiona, I don't want you to leave. Not just because of Webster, but because. He hesitated, seeming to search for words. Because, she prompted, her heart suddenly racing. Because in these weeks, you and Emma have brought something to this house it never had before. Life. Warmth. His voice dropped lower. I never thought I'd want a family. Then you arrived. Fiona's breath caught. She'd felt the same transformation, the way the ranch had begun to feel like home, how Dakota's presence made her feel both safe and alive in ways she'd never experienced. I care for you, he continued when she remained silent. More than I thought possible. But I know you came here out of necessity, not choice, and I won't presume. Fiona closed the distance between them, placing a trembling hand on his arm. I came here because I had nowhere else to go. I've stayed because I couldn't bear the thought of leaving. Their first kiss was gentle, uncertain, like the first snowflake of winter testing the ground. When they parted, Dakota's eyes held a warmth that melted the last of Fiona's reserves. I'll protect you both, he promised. Always. For the first time since learning of her pregnancy, Fiona allowed herself to hope for a future filled with joy rather than mere survival. As Christmas approached, life at the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Dakota began courting Fiona properly, bringing her wildflowers preserved from fall and small gifts for Emma. Mrs. Caldwell watched with approving eyes, often finding reasons to leave them alone together while she tended to Emma. The threat of Webster seemed to recede as winter gripped the territory in earnest, making travel difficult. Dakota reinforced security around the ranch nonetheless, ensuring men were always on watch and all hands were armed. On Christmas Eve, with the ranch house decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons, Dakota surprised Fiona with a small wooden horse he'd carved for Emma and a silver locket for Fiona herself. It's beautiful, she breathed, opening the delicate clasp to find it empty. I thought perhaps a lock of Emma's hair, Dakota suggested. And maybe someday, something from our other children. Fiona's eyes widened. Are you asking? Dakota took her hands. I'm asking if you'll consider making this arrangement permanent. If you'll consider becoming my wife. Before she could answer, shouts erupted from outside. Dakota was on his feet instantly, reaching for his rifle. Stay here, he ordered, his voice transforming into that of the hardened rancher. "Mrs. Caldwell, take them to the back room." The housekeeper appeared as if summoned, her usually kind face set in grim lines. "Come, dear. Quickly. What's happening?" Fiona demanded, gathering Emma from her cradle. A ranch hand burst through the door. "Riders, boss. At least 15. Webster's with them." Dakota's expression darkened. "How far?" "Half-mile, and closing. They're armed." Fiona clutched Emma tighter. "Dakota, they've come for her." "They won't get her," he said firmly. "Or you." He turned to Mrs. Caldwell. "Get them to the root cellar. Use the tunnel if necessary." The older woman nodded, already guiding Fiona toward the kitchen. "There's a hidden space beneath the house," she explained hurriedly. "Mr. Mackenzie had it built when outlaws were more common. It connects to a tunnel that leads to the north pasture." "I can't leave him," Fiona protested, even as she followed. "That man has survived worse than Silas Webster," Mrs. Caldwell said firmly. "But he needs to know you're safe so he can focus." In the kitchen, Mrs. Caldwell moved a heavy rug to reveal a trapdoor. Below was a small, surprisingly well-appointed space with supplies, blankets, and even a small stove for heat. Fiona descended reluctantly, holding Emma close. "I'll come for you when it's safe," Mrs. Caldwell promised, closing the door above them. In the dimness of a single lantern, Fiona listened to the muffled sounds of men taking positions, of horses approaching, and then Dakota's voice, carrying even through the floorboards. "That's far enough, Webster. Mackenzie, we don't want trouble with you. Just give us the woman and the baby." "There's no woman or baby here that concerns you." Webster's laugh was ugly. $5,000, Mackenzie. That's what they're paying for that brat. We can split it. No one needs to know. There's nothing to split because no child is being sold. Dakota's voice was steady. "Turn around and leave my property while you still can. You're outnumbered, Ghost Rider. Your reputation won't save you from 15 guns. Maybe not, but I guarantee I'll take you with me, Webster. And what good is gold to a dead man?" The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Then Webster spoke again, his voice now tinged with desperation. "The child isn't even hers. The real mother died in childbirth back east, daughter of a railroad baron. The father wants the child back. We're just returning it to its rightful family." Fiona gasped, clutching Emma tighter. It was a lie, a terrible, calculated lie designed to justify their monstrous plan. Dakota's reply was cold as steel. "That's the best you could come up with? The woman gave birth in that cabin you tried to raid. I've got witnesses who saw her pregnant. Now, I'm giving you one last chance to leave." The sound of a rifle being cocked echoed. "Have it your way, Mackenzie. Boys, spread out and find the woman. She has to be in the house." What followed was chaos, shouts, gunfire, the splintering of wood. Fiona huddled in the corner of the hidden room, singing softly to Emma to cover the sounds of violence above. How long it lasted, she couldn't say, but eventually, a terrible silence fell. Footsteps approached the trapdoor. Fiona reached for the small pistol Mrs. Caldwell had pressed into her hand, prepared to defend Emma with her last breath. The door creaked open, and Dakota's face appeared, bloodied but whole. "It's over," he said softly. "They're gone." "Gone? All of them?" Fiona climbed up, scanning his body for injuries. "Webster's dead. 2 others. The rest scattered when they saw how it was going to end." He reached for Emma, checking her with gentle hands, as if to assure himself she was unharmed. "They won't be back. Not after this." Mrs. Caldwell appeared with bandages and whiskey. "Sit down before you fall down, Mr. Mackenzie. That shoulder needs tending." Only then did Fiona notice the dark stain spreading across his left shoulder. "You're wounded." "It's nothing," he insisted, though he allowed Mrs. Caldwell to help him to a chair. "Just a graze." As the housekeeper cleaned and bandaged the wound, Fiona settled Emma in her cradle, then knelt beside Dakota, taking his hand. "You could have been killed," she whispered, tears finally breaking free. "All because of us." Dakota's fingers tightened around hers. "I would do it again, 100 times over." His eyes, weary but determined, met hers. "I love you, Fiona Parker. You and Emma. I want you to stay, not out of necessity or gratitude, but because you choose to." Fiona's heart swelled. Through all the danger and uncertainty, one truth had become crystal clear. She loved this man who had risked everything to protect them. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes to staying." Yes to becoming your wife. Yes to giving Emma a father who will love her as his own. Dakota's smile was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. He pulled her closer with his good arm, pressing his lips to hers in a kiss that held promise of all the tomorrows they would share. 3 months later, as the first wildflowers of spring pushed through the melting snow, Dakota and Fiona were married under a clear blue Wyoming sky. Emma, growing plump and strong, watched from Mrs. Caldwell's arms, reaching out for the colorful ribbons in her mother's hair. The small gathering of ranch hands and neighbors cheered as Dakota kissed his bride, sealing their vows before God and community. No one mentioned the events of Christmas Eve. The word had spread throughout the territory. The Ghost Rider had found something worth protecting more fiercely than his land or reputation of family. That night, after the celebrations had ended and Emma was sleeping peacefully in the nursery Dakota had built adjoining their bedroom, he held Fiona close. "I never thought I'd find this," he confessed, his voice soft in the darkness. "After the war, I believed the best I could hope for was to build something that was mine, something no one could take away." Fiona traced the scar on his shoulder, still pink and new. "And now I know that what matters isn't what you own, but who you love." He kissed her forehead. "You and Emma showed me that. She'll need a brother or sister soon," Fiona said with a smile. "Someone to share this wild, beautiful life with." Dakota laughed softly. "Mrs. Mackenzie, are you already planning to expand our family?" "Perhaps." She nestled closer to him. "But for now, I just want to enjoy being your wife." As spring turned to summer, the ranch flourished. Fiona's garden burst with vegetables and flowers. Emma took her first tottering steps across the porch, and Dakota expanded the herd, building a legacy for their children. In the evenings, they would sit together on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. Sometimes Dakota would tell stories of his scouting days, or Fiona would read from her father's worn books of poetry. Often, they would simply sit in contented silence, Emma sleeping between them, the threat of Silas Webster and his ilk a distant memory. One such evening, as twilight painted the sky in lavender and gold, Dakota turned to his wife with wondering eyes. "Do you ever think about how close we came to never meeting? If I hadn't been riding past your cabin that day." Fiona shook her head. "I believe we were meant to find each other. All the hardship, all the wrong turns they were leading us here." Dakota lifted her hand to his lips. "Then I'm grateful for every step of the journey, even the painful ones, because they brought me to you." By the following spring, their family had grown with the birth of a son, James, named after Dakota's father. Emma, now a chattering toddler, appointed herself guardian of her baby brother, solemnly explaining the workings of the ranch to him as he gazed up at her with adoring eyes. The ranch prospered, becoming known not only for its fine cattle, but as a place of refuge for those in need. Travelers, particularly women alone with children, knew they could find shelter and a fresh start at the Mackenzie Ranch. Some stayed on as workers, others moved on when they were ready, but all left with resources and renewed hope. 5 years after Dakota had first ridden to Fiona's rescue, their family gathered for a special occasion, the groundbreaking of a school on the edge of their property. Fiona, now mother to 3 children, had convinced Dakota that the growing community needed education. "My father would be proud," she said, watching as Dakota and their eldest son turned the first shovelful of earth. "Education was his passion, as this ranch is yours. And both are part of our legacy now," Dakota replied, lifting their youngest daughter onto his shoulders so she could see the proceedings. "A home, a livelihood, and knowledge, the best gifts we can give our children." Emma, now a serious 7-year-old with her mother's red gold hair and her adoptive father's determined spirit, tugged at Fiona's skirt. "Mama, tell me again about how Papa saved us from the bad men," she requested. It had become a favorite bedtime story, though carefully edited for young ears. Fiona smiled, kneeling to her daughter's level. "Your father was the bravest man in the territory. When those men tried to take you away, he stood tall and said, 'Not while I breathe.' And he's kept that promise every day since." Emma nodded solemnly. "Because he loves us more than all the gold in the world." "That's right, sweetheart. More than all the gold in the world." Dakota joined them, wrapping an arm around Fiona's waist and ruffling Emma's hair. "And that's a truth that will never change, no matter how many years pass. As they walked back to the ranch house together, their children racing ahead, Dakota and Fiona lingered behind, hands clasped. "Did you ever imagine this life?" he asked her. "Back when you were alone in that cabin?" Fiona shook her head. "I hoped only for survival then. This," she gestured to their home, their children, the future taking shape around them. "This is beyond anything I could have dreamed." Dakota stopped, turning to face her. The years had added silver to his temples, lines at the corners of his eyes. But his gaze held the same intensity as the day he'd declared that no one would take her child while he breathed. "I love you, Fiona Mackenzie," he said simply. More with each passing day. She reached up to touch his face. This man who had transformed from legend to protector to the very center of her world. "And I love you, Dakota Mackenzie. My cowboy, my hero, my heart." As the Wyoming sun set on their flourishing ranch, painting the sky in brilliant hues of promise, they sealed their enduring love with a kiss that spoke of all they had overcome and all they had yet to build together, a family forged not in gold, but in courage, sacrifice, and love that would outlast them all.